applause to the end of when the speakers have spoken. And please know that all views are welcome. But just let us maintain a respectful attitude. Thank you very much.
I'd like to begin with the Islamic greeting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Good evening and welcome to tonight's debate, which is entitled, Is There a Need for God? Okay, so I'd like to begin by thanking the sponsors and organizers of this event, Islamic Society of Edinburgh University and Edinburgh University Chaplaincy. I'd also like to thank the Humanist Society for joining us in tonight's debate, for participating, and on behalf of all these organizations, I'd like to thank you all for being here with us this evening. So once again, the topic of debate this evening is entitled, Is There a Need for God? And we have with us two eminent guests and speakers, Mr. Adam Deen and Mr. Tim Maguire, who I'll introduce shortly. But before the introductions, I'd like to just outline a few points regarding the structure of the debate and emphasize the protocol as well. So each speaker will be given 20-minute time slots to present their cases. This will be followed by 10-minute rebuttals for each speaker to respond to one another's arguments, and finally 5-minute conclusions. And then, of course, we'll open the floor to Q&A and discussion. And with that said, I want to emphasize what our colleague Ali Neal mentioned as far as protocol. That, we do like to insist that you remain respectful during the debate, especially during the Q&A sessions. We must remember that the reason we, create space for such events is to create a platform for open, healthy discussion and debate, one which is ideally open-minded, bias-free as much as possible, thought-provoking, but most importantly, one in which we ensure mutual respect for one another. So I'd like to emphasize that. So with that said, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, who shall be debating the affirmative stance debate, Mr. Adam Deen. So Mr. Adam Deen is an international public speaker and broadcaster. He has been working in the field of Muslim apologetics for almost a decade, speaking at over 30 university campuses across the UK. He regularly debates with prominent academics on issues ranging from religious philosophy and theology. His work draws on contemporary philosophy and Islam. He frequently appears on mainstream TV, including the BBC, and was a former Islam channel presenter. And now I'd like to pass on to the colleague from the Humanist Society to introduce our other speaker, Mr. Tim Maguire. Is he in here?
I thought you were doing it.
No, we'll just like introduce him.
Okay.
No problem.
Wait, would you like me to?
Just go for it, go for it.
I shall do it. Hello. Tim Maguire is a cellmate of the Humanist Society of Scotland. He's a former producer and director, and he has been a trustee of the society and as media officer, and has written the odd piece of humanism, on humanism for The Guardian. However, he is a mere amateur in this debating game. And now.
So, should we welcome Mr. Adam Deen to the stage?
In the name of God, most just tap. I'm using technology.
Go.
It doesn't overheat, does it? So, in the name of God, most merciful, most kind, I'd like to begin by thanking the University of Edinburgh Chaplaincy for the invite. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's my first time that I've spoken at the Edinburgh University. Also, I'd like to thank the Islamic Society of Edinburgh for inviting me also. Thanks to the Humanist Society of Edinburgh University for the participation, and also Tim for accepting the invitation to debate. And I hope that you find the debate this evening informative and also entertaining. So, I think it's important that from the outset, you okay? I'm quite loud.
Speak louder.
I think it's important that we note that this debate this evening is not about the existence of God, whether there are good reasons to believe in God's existence, whether there are reasons not to believe in His existence, although I do believe that there are good reasons to believe in God's existence. Tonight's debate is whether God's existence has an impact on our lives, if we really do need God in our lives. And I'll be arguing that we need God for three reasons. first ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose, and God is the only way in which we can secure a genuine notion of morality. Now, ever since the Enlightenment, man has tried to rid himself from the God narrative. He felt constrained and restricted by religion. He regarded religion as something that hindered his life. It was part of this juvenile, delinquent stage of human development. So he wanted to rid himself from the shackles of religion. But this had a disastrous effect on his life. This reality, this disastrous effect, was foreseen by Friedrich Nietzsche, who proclaimed the death of God, and with it, all meaning and value in our lives. So, the end result of this enterprise of divorcing God from our lives, this party gone mad, resulted in nihilism. Modern man has an uncanny resemblance to the state of the Greek mythological character Icarus. Icarus, with the help of his father, constructed wings made from feathers and wax and wanted to escape the prisons of Crete, and he was successful in doing so. But then he became deluded with his achievements and his abilities, and ignored the advice of his father, who had this ancient wisdom, and wanted to fly high, too close to the sun. And what happened? Everyone knows the story. The wax and the feathers disintegrated, and he fell to his demise and died. Modern man too became deluded with his achievements and his abilities. Felt that he could go on living life without God. He didn't need God anymore. But in killing God in his life, he killed himself. The confidence to provide an alternative narrative without God has been shattered. The Enlightenment project failed. Why? Because the universe does not have a universal story. Why? Because you cannot have a universal story if there is no universal story. The optimism that the Enlightenment movement rose with has completely diminished. With time, the advent of time and further scientific progress, instead of our present and our future becoming illuminated, it becomes dark. In the book, Pale Blue Dot, the late Carl Sagan, a noted atheist, concentrates on an image taken 4 billion miles away by the Voyager spacecraft. This is what he says. Because of the reflection of the sunlight, the Earth seems to be sitting in a beam of light, as if there was some special significance to this small world. But it's just an accident of geometry and optics. Our imagined self-importance, the delusion of some prevailing position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in a great and developing cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all its vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. He also says, who are we? We find that we live in an insignificant planet of 100 stars lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of the universe, in which there are far more galaxies than people. Some have described man as a computer made from flesh. This computer made from flesh, this insignificant chemical stone, as Stephen Hawking has once described, resides in a universe that does not care for his existence. Man is a cosmic orphan lost in an infinitely large, impersonal universe. Moreover, our ultimate fate is tied to the state, the universe, the end result of the universe as a whole, which seems for a destined, dismal end. The data from cosmology suggests that the final outcome of the physical universe is that it will continue expanding forever and ending in entropy. The better we understand the world, the better we understand such claims, the more futile and meaningless everything seems. So, it is not that each and every one of us here will simply just pass out of existence. There's more to that. But the entire human race is going in the same direction. The entire human race is doomed to destruction. So does your life really matter? Does it really matter whether you existed at all? Does it really matter what you do in your life? Whether it's the long hours of study, the success in our jobs, our friendships, raising a family, to accumulate a fortune, the contributions to science, to feed the poor and strive to end poverty in the world, the research in medicine, to build awe-inspiring buildings. There's many around here. Writing a bestseller, efforts to counter injustice in the world, the sacrifices for others, and conquering lands. In the end, it all comes from nothing. In the end, it all ends the same. In the end, it makes no difference. Why? Because if our lives are utterly meaningless, whatever we fill our lives up with will also be meaningless. The atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell concludes. He says this. Listen to his words. He says that man is a product of causes which had no provision of the end they were achieving. That his origin, his growth, his hopes, his fears, his love, his beliefs are but the outcomes of accidental co-locations of atoms. That no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve the individual life beyond the grave. That all labours of all ages, all devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast depth of the solar system. And that whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of the universe of ignorance. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them would hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation on which despair can the soul's application be built. Our fate is tragically tied to the destruction of the universe. Indeed, this is why the French existentialist philosopher Camus said this. He said, but there is one true serious philosophical question, and that is suicide. Shall we carry on living? What's the point? So it does not make a difference that you ever existed at all. It does not make a difference if you live or die. None of those matter. Second, we need God for ultimate purpose. If there is no God, then man has no goal, has no reason for his existence, has no objective for his life. I usually pick on students that come late to my lectures, but I won't do this. Now, one source that might be relied upon to provide some kind of story to make sense of the world is science. Unfortunately for this hope, however, contemporary science largely reiterates the sort of despair that Russell commented. An often noted remark of Steven Weinberg underscores the fertility of finding answers in a scientific account of the world. He says this: the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. The effort to understand the universe is one of the very few things that lifts human life a little above the level of farce and gives it some grace of tragedy. Brothers, sisters, friends, folks, if there is a story to be told about the universe, it is one of tragedy. Contemporary naturalistic scientists see our emergence as due to chance, the extraordinary result of some accidental concurrence of a number of factors. Without God, the universe is a mere cosmic accident. That's all it is. But if the universe is a cosmic accident, what of man? Where does man fit into the picture? How can we account for him? Is there any hope for us? Listen to the words of Stephen Jay Gould, the late Stephen Jay Gould, paleontologist from Harvard University, anti-theist thinker. Listen to what he says. He says, "We are here because one odd group of fish had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures. That's why you're here. Because comets struck the Earth and wiped out dinosaurs, thereby giving mammals a chance not otherwise available. So thank your lucky stars in a literal sense, because the Earth never froze entirely during an ice age, because a small and tenuous species arising in Africa a quarter of a million years ago has managed so far to survive by hook and by crook. We yearn for a higher answer, but none exists." So man is nothing more than a freak of nature. That's all that he is. Get a bit of stuff, have some time, some potentiality, and then you have man. There's nothing special about it. Qualitatively, you have as much purpose as a rat. Now, it would be safe to say, and fair to say, that actually bacteria have more role than you do. They have more significance than we ever can do. So man has no reason, no goal, and no purpose for his existence. Lastly, we need God to guarantee and secure our notions of morality. Now, in order for morality to have any kind of meaning and significance, it must be objective. It must allow us to have the moral high ground. Because then we can say, you're wrong, you're right. Then we can make sense of praise and blame. Without it, we cannot do any of those things. Now, if I were to say that torturing a child for fun is objectively evil, we can all agree that's objectively true, right? Please say yes. I'm in the right crowd. That is objectively true. Now imagine the entire world thought, for one moment, that it was actually good to torture children for fun. Would that have any bearing on the proposition? No. Because morality, or something that is objectively true, is independent whether we believe in it or not. That's what gives us its objectivity. It's a bit like saying 1 + 1 = 2. Even if the whole world believed that it was 4, it would not be true. It would still be 2 + 2, as is torturing a child for fun is evil. Now, what typically follows from atheism is naturalism, the idea that all that exists is a natural world, that there's a closed system, a spatio-temporal system, where we can discover what exists by using our physicalist terms, science, if you like chemistry, biology, physics. Now the problem here is this, what many philosophers, and including atheist philosophers, have recognized, is that morality does not have a naturalistic property, a material property. It does not have a texture, it does not have a shape, it does not have a density. Cannot find morality in a test tube. So then how do we locate morality, good and evil, in a world that all that exists is a natural world, or that all that exists are things that have properties in a natural sense? The late J.L. Mackie, a prominent atheist philosopher of the previous century, underscores this point very well. He says, moral properties constitute so odd a cluster of qualities and relations that they are most unlikely not to have arisen in the ordinary course of events. And listen to his conclusion, without an all-powerful God to create them. What's Mackie saying here? He's saying this. He's saying, look, if we have a world which can only be understood by using our physicalist terms like physics and chemistry, it's going to be really hard to explain the existence of such things as good and evil. Suppose we trace back to the history of the cosmos, where we have this Big Bang that caused itself. I don't believe that, but for the argument's sake. And we have these particles, they formed galaxies, and these galaxies had these planets formed, and a planet had the necessary and sufficient conditions for the existence of intelligent life. Now, if we were to ask the question, how do we account for hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, that's a very simple question to answer. We just trace back those components, those structures, and we can explain that. But if we're going to start speaking about right and wrong in the moral sense, good and evil, Mackie is saying that that's going to be very, very difficult to do. It simply does not fit with the naturalistic story of creation. Those things are just put in there, and an arbitrary notion of morality seems to be demanded to be accepted. Like, for example, the universe is 13.5 billion years old, approximately. Give or take a couple of minutes. 13.5 billion years old. What we have is a history of what is the case. a description. The last 5% of it, we have Homo sapiens evolving. So up until the Homo sapiens evolving, what we have is this notion of good and evil just popping into our lives. But the point is, where is the justification for that? There isn't. Oh, that was a setup. Just joking. So what we have is this arbitrarily, this injection of good and evil, these concepts of good and evil. Moreover, if God does not exist, then what is man? He's an animal, is he not? At most, he's an advanced primate. That's all that he can be. But if human beings are just animals, how is it that we somehow do not follow the relationships that animals have? The animals do not have morality. The animal kingdom does not have morality at all. Because animals are not moral agents. It does not make sense for Homo sapiens to start speaking in moral terms. For example, when an eagle steals from another eagle, steals the fish from its claws, we don't accuse the eagle of stealing. We do that, right? When a fox raids into a chicken, what are they called? Hen? Chicken? Coop, that's it, yeah. And kills all the chickens, it doesn't eat them and just runs away. We don't accuse the fox of genocide. That doesn't make sense, right? It would be bizarre. So why are these relationships, if you see, if it were, why is it that these behaviours are not accepted in human relations? Why are they deemed immoral or actually evil? Massimo Bellucci, a biologist, writes, what we call homicide, rape, or even infanticide is very common amongst different types of animals. Lions, for example, commit infanticide on a regular basis. Morality is the invention of human beings. There is no such thing as objective morality. If man is no longer distinguishable through his condition, then he joins the ranks of the animal species, and his inherent dignity disappears as a distinguishing factor, and no longer is he a moral agent. So if all that the natural world exists, we cannot account, still got some time, don't worry. I can't miss that, don't I? If all that exists is the natural world, we cannot account for the existence of good and evil in the world. If God does not exist, then man is nothing more than an advanced primate. He's an animal, but we know that the animal kingdom is amoral. It does not have morality governing it. So to conclude, we do need God for ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose, and also to secure our sense of morality in the world. Thank you very much.
Now, our next speaker is Maguire.
So, thank you very much, Adam, and good evening, everybody. Peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. My name is Tim Maguire. I feel really uncomfortable tonight. I'm up against a heavyweight. This guy has been studying his subject for 10 years. He's been on TV. He's debated against serious academics. I spent the afternoon in my locker moving some compost, and I wrote this this morning. So I don't really feel match fit, but I give it a go. So when I was asked to do this debate by Harriet at the Chapel Society on the Humanist Contact at University, I said, yeah, sure, fine. I don't get asked to do very much with the students. And then I realised that the last time I'd been in a debate was when I was at school, which is some time ago. But having a debate of this kind seems to me slightly surprising. I think the whole purpose of debate, is it not, is to persuade other people that your point of view is acceptable, that they may be won over. Now that's fine. If you could persuade me to convert to Islam, that would be fine. I would have a problem with converting you to not believing in God, because, okay, you're safe enough in Britain, but in Iran, Egypt, Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Afghanistan. Losing your religion puts you in danger of facing a death sentence. Now that's really serious. So don't worry, I'm not even going to try to persuade you to agree with me. I'll tell you why. A couple of years ago, I read a really great book by a neuroscientist called Jonah Lehrer. It's called The Decisive Moment, and the subtitle is How the Brain Makes Up Its Mind. And I was lucky enough to interview for an article I was writing on the nature of belief. In The Decisive Moment, Lehrer describes the brain as a great big argument, and he shows how, when somebody finds things too uncomfortable to be uncertain, it can trick itself into thinking the wrong things. And I asked him what that told us about the nature of political and religious belief. And he said, if you look at the fMRI scans of partisan voters during the run-up to the 2004 US elections, what you see is that people use reason to preserve what they already believe. No amount of persuasion or new information will persuade them to change their minds, because partisan viewers are absolutely persuaded that their worldview is rational, and people who disagree with them are irrational. And the truth is that we are all, believers or unbelievers, rationalizers, and once we've identified with an ideology, we edit the world to fit. So that's why I'm not going to try and persuade you. You spent at least the last 10 years arguing passionately for your beliefs, and somehow I don't think a 20-minute chat from me is going to make any difference. But let's return to the question I'm supposed to be debating. Is there a need for God? Well, you'd expect me to say no, but actually I agree with you. There is a need for God. Societies from the dawn of time have had gods. There are thousands of gods in the world even now. There's a terrific book by Norman Lewis called A Goddess in the Stones, in which you meet a tribe in Bihar who worship the goddess who lives in those stones over there. It's a very human thing to want to have gods, but it's strange that when we talk about God in this country, we typically talk about God in the context of the monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. I don't really want to restrict the debate to that, but let's just take somebody who believes God is really important, who's been in the news recently, a guy called Joseph Kony. I mean, he is so convinced that he's acting for God that he's named his army after him. I don't know if you're aware, Joseph Kony leads the Lord's Resistance Army. It operates in northern Uganda, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Central African Republic. But it was formed in northern Uganda in 1997 as part of the resistance movement against the central Ugandan government. Now, it's led by Kony, who proclaims himself as the spokesperson of God, and he claims to be establishing a theocratic state based on the Ten Commandments. Now, the Lord's Resistance Army is accused of widespread human rights violations, including murder, abduction, mutilation, and particularly forcing children to participate in hostilities. There are reports of cannibalism, child sex slavery in the group. It's designated as a terrorist organisation by the United States, and Kony is wanted by the International Court for war crimes. Now, okay, he's perhaps too easy a target. Let's take somebody who comes from a rather different background, somebody who has benefited from the best education system in the world, somebody who is a graduate of Yale University and Harvard Business School, George W. Bush. Now, George needs God. George, when he became a born-again Christian at the age of 40, and in 1999, he called up a friend called James Robinson, who's a minister, and said to him, I'm not going to do the voice, I haven't got time. I've heard the call. I believe that God wants me to run for president. Now, this was reported in the book The Faith of George Bush in 2004. And in 2005, the Guardian reported a conversation that took place when Bush met the Palestinian delegation at Sharm el-Sheikh during the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations 4 months after the invasion of Iraq. Now, one of the delegates, Nabil Shah, who's Palestinian foreign minister at the time, said, President Bush said to all of us, I am driven with a mission from God. God would tell me, George, go and fight these terrorists in Afghanistan. And I did. And then God would tell me, George, go and end the tyranny in Iraq. And I did. Mr. Bush went on again. He said, and now again, I hear God's words coming to me. Go and get the Palestinians their state, and get the Israelis their security, and get peace in the Middle East. And by God, I'm going to do it. Now, Mr. Bush's belief in God was crucial to winning the support of Middle America. It's this very strange irony that America is a secular state, but actually a belief in God is very, very important there. It would much be easier to become the President of the United States as a Muslim than as an atheist right now. When George Bush was campaigning, he had a news conference at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, where a journalist called Robert I. Sherman asked him, said, what are you going to do to win the votes of the Americans who are atheists? And Bush said, well, I guess I'm pretty weak in the atheist community. Faith in God is important to me. But Sherman said, surely you recognise the equal patriotism and citizenship of Americans who are atheists? And Bush said, no. I don't know that atheists should be considered as citizens, nor should be considered to be patriots. This is one nation under God. But okay, that is America, and we all know they're very odd over there. What about here in Britain? Well, do our politicians believe we need God? Local boy made good, fetish schoolboy Tony Blair went to Parkinson in 2006, and he ignored the advice of his spin doctor, Alistair Campbell, who said, look to Blair, we don't do God. And he said that his values sprung from his Christianity, and that they had guided, his values and philosophy had guided him in his public life. And he explained his decision to go to war in Iraq by saying, if you've got faith about these things, then you realise that judgment is made by other people. If you believe in God, it's made by God as well. Now, as many commentators at the time pointed out, Blair's remarks carried the risk of inflaming opinion in the Arab world, where the term crusader is commonly used to condemn Christian leaders in the Middle East. But he did. Talking of the Middle East, perhaps we should ask, do they need God there? Well, the Israelis think they do. As far as they're concerned, their country was given to them by God. That is their justification for annexing Palestinian land in defiance of successive United Nations resolutions. Golda Meir famously said in an interview with Le Monde in 1971, this country exists as a fulfillment of a promise made by God himself. It would be ridiculous to ask it to account for its legitimacy. 2 years previously, she said to the Sunday Times, there is no such thing as a Palestinian people. It is not as if we came and threw them out of their country. They didn't exist. How can we return the occupied territories? There was nobody to return them to. So we can see that there are some very influential people who do believe that there is a need for God, because it allows them to justify their actions in a way that is not open to rational criticism. If we go back to 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal, Blaise said, men never do evil quite so cheerfully and completely as when they do it from religious conviction. So is there a need for God? Perhaps. But I hope that you'll agree that a belief in God doesn't really help to solve problems that are essentially political and ethical. In fact, it exacerbates them. Now, you could argue, and I would agree, that the invasions of both Afghanistan and Iraq were ill-judged, illegal, and wholly counterproductive. Since the West invaded Afghanistan, the death toll is estimated between 18 and 40,000 civilians. Coalition military fatalities are about 3,000, pretty much the same number of people who were killed at 9/11. In Iraq, coalition forces have lost 5,000 soldiers, but the death toll of Iraqi civilians is somewhere between 700,000 and 1.2 million people. That's more than died in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. But for Bush and Blair, that's okay, because they are doing God's work. So is there really a need for God? Well, there is a whole other debate about how this world in which we live came into being, and I'm not going to go there because I'm not a scientist, and I think that while I am excited by the scientific account, there are far more important things to talk about, and what concerns me as a humanist is how human beings behave towards one another and the planet in which we all live right now. Is there a need for God? Well, perhaps if you're trapped underground, there probably is. On October 13th, 2010, 33 miners in Chile were rescued after 70 days trapped underground. And Mario Sepulveda, the second miner to come out to be rescued, he said, I never doubted, I always knew God would rescue us. And the rescue was hailed as a miracle, if you remember in the press, with many churches and faiths claiming to credit for the miracle. Now, a little over a month later, on November 24th, 2010, 29 miners in New Zealand were presumed dead after the second explosion in the mine shifted efforts from rescue to recovery. Now, I don't remember any stories at that point about God failing the miners or about God having something in against New Zealand. Let's go to your third point. Just people would argue that God is the source of all morality and without God there's a moral vacuum. David Cameron is not the only world leader who would agree with this in a speech in December of last year. You may remember he urged a revival of traditional Christian values to counter Britain's moral collapse. The speech came at an event to launch the 400th edition anniversary of the King James Bible, and the Prime Minister claimed that our passive tolerance of immoral behaviour had fueled the summer riots, excess in the city, MPs' expenses of use, and is Islamic terrorism. It's not a bad spread, is it? He qualified his remarks by admitting that he was only a vaguely practicing Christian who was full of doubts about big theological questions. Perhaps that's just as well. Now, thankfully, not all religious people would agree with him that morality comes from God. Richard Holloway, the former Bishop of Edinburgh, and the Dalai Lama have both argued that we need a secular morality that is beyond religion. The Dalai Lama published a very good book last year called Beyond Religion, in which he says, and I summarise, religion is just another human system that can work for good or for bad. But the fact of multiple conflicting religions makes belief unfit as a universal basis for ethics. And the creation of universal ethics need not depend on religion. And now I'm quoting him. He says, what we need today is an approach to ethics that makes no recourse to religion and can be equally acceptable to those with faith and those without, a secular ethics. Richard Holloway published this book in 1999, former Bishop of Edinburgh. The book is called Godless Morality. He says the use of God in moral debate is so problematic as to be almost worthless. We can argue with one another as to whether this or that alleged claim emanates from God, but surely it's better to leave God out of the argument and find strong human reasons for supporting the arguments that we support. When this book was published, he was attacked by his co-religionists across the world. Some of them called for him to be tried for heresy. So thankfully, not all men of God believe that we need to believe in God to be good, and that is the humanist position which I embrace. Humanists reject the claim that you cannot be moral without God, and that we will not be or are unlikely to be good without God. Humanists generally favour a naturalist, evolutionary account of how our moral intuition is developed. And we believe that our ethics should be informed by studying what human beings are actually like, and what will help them flourish in this world rather than the next. We favour moral forms of moral education which will help us develop this and equip us with the skills to discharge it properly. So we also deny that in order for our lives to have meaning, that meaning must be given from above. The lives of Pablo Picasso, Florence Nightingale, Mother Teresa or Einstein are all rich, significant and meaningful whether or not there is a God. Now perhaps I should also make it very clear that although I don't believe that we need a God, I do not mean to say that there shouldn't be a God. I believe that people should be free to follow their beliefs, religious or otherwise, which is why I am a secularist. There has been a systematic attempt recently to change the meaning of that word, so let me take a moment to reassert it. Secularists favour an open society in which the state takes a neutral position in relation to religion, protecting the freedom of individuals to espouse, follow or reject and criticise both religious and atheist beliefs. And while obviously humanists would reject any attempt to coerce people into embracing religious beliefs, equally we're no less opposed to forcing people to embrace atheism, as happened under communist regimes like Stalin and Mao. So do we need God to lead good and worthwhile lives? I would say not. I believe that you can, and I accept that you can lead a good and worthwhile life while believing in a God, but it may be harder for you to come to terms with the changes which are happening in society. Now, preparing for this talk, I used Facebook to ask some friends for some suggestions. I'm very grateful to all those of you who have replied. My friend Dr. Stuart Ritchie pointed out, Dr. Yes, sorry, he will be soon, he's very clever. He pointed out that societies are very low rates of religiosity, like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, etc., have very high human development indices. Strong economies, happy people, free presses, effective education systems, and so on. So he would say that you don't really need God for all that stuff. Now, lack of religion may not be the cause of these positive things, but you can clearly show that God is not required to have a successful country. Denmark is currently the happiest place in the world. Now, we haven't got much time, we've got less than 5 minutes. If people need strong interpretations of God, there is psychological literature which shows consistently that within individuals, higher rates of religiosity are associated with a lower intelligence and higher prejudice. And where can we find that right now, I wonder? Well, let's take the campaign for equal marriage that's been happening in the UK recently. Over the last 20 years, we've seen a sea change in attitudes towards homosexuality in Britain. The Tories under Margaret Thatcher were actively hostile. Section 28 of the Local Government Act 1988 banned councils from promoting homosexuality. Jump ahead to 2002, then Conservative leader Ian Duncan-Smith tried to persuade his colleagues to vote against the law, allowing gay couples to adopt. By 2004, however, civil partnerships will be passed into law with little opposition. We now have a Tory leader, the aforementioned David Cameron, who says he supports gay marriage, not because of his conservatism, but not despite his conservatism, but because of it. And this week, the government is bringing forward proposals to legalise it. And this is a fantastic advance. It recognises the importance of love. It has the backing of most of the British population. Only 15% of the British population are opposed to the idea. Well, who stands against it? The churches. The next Archbishop of Canterbury is probably going to be John Centenary. He's against it. The former Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, is against it. Cardinal Keith O'Brien is against it. Evangelical congregations, especially those with ties to America, are against it. Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi, is against it. And all the major schools of Sharia law, and I appeal to you to make clear if this is correct, preach against homosexuality and would not recognise a same-sex marriage. So, why do I talk about this? Well, it's very good. Love is perhaps the one thing that we have between religion and humanism, what we have in common. Love is fundamental to the development of our moral sense. I think we can find some common ground here. I know that the phrase God is love is a commonplace in Christianity. Is it the same in Islam? I know the phrase Allahu Akbar is equally familiar in the Quran. God is great. Allahu Muhibba, God is love, appears from my researches, which admit are fairly shallow, to be rather absent. I wonder why. Love is fundamental to the development of our moral sense. Let me go back to my friend Joe Lara, who I mentioned earlier on. What he's discovered, what neuroscientists know, is that love is fundamental to the development of a moral being. It's essential to the development of the brain. There's increasing evidence that we don't have a sense of attachment and love. The emotional brain is diminished and it's very tough to recover. There's a critical window in our first few years of life when it's absolutely vital that we feel that we belong and are surrounded by people who love and accept us. And we've seen through the experiments which have been conducted with infant monkeys when they have pride of a mother figure, and we've seen when children were found in the orphanages in Romania, what happens to people who are not brought up surrounded by love. And without it, even the most basic moral decisions are impossible. As Harry Harlow wrote, we have to learn how to love before we can learn how to live. So as a humanist, I believe that we may not need God, we do need love. And it's this instinctive compassion that human beings have. It's not something given to us by God, it's something that we share with the higher primates. There was a story in the papers just last year about a deaf chimpanzee in a zoo park somewhere in Britain, where all the other chimpanzees gathered around it in the same way, and they appear to be mourning its death. The same thing has been observed in elephants. So the moral sense that we have as human beings is not something that's given to us by God, it's something that's been given to us through our evolution. Thank you very much for listening. We have 10 seconds before I'm supposed to finish.
We'll have a few minutes for a break, and then we'll continue with the rebuttal arguments. So I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
In the name of God, most merciful, most kind. Thank you for that too. That was quite I actually liked it. I think he's a great guy. He's a great guy. We get along really well. I don't drink it.
We'll go for a juice bar.
But, okay, so in my opening speech I argued that we need God for ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose, and also to secure and guarantee our notions of morality. Now, listening to Tim, I'm not too sure what his arguments were against my argument to say that we need God for ultimate meaning and purpose, although he did actually mention something about morality, which I will come to. Now, first I'd like to address some of the points that he made. Now, in the early part of his opening speech, his strategy if you like, was to give examples of people who used God and did horrible things. That's not going to work, because that's equivalent to me saying, well, communist Russia killed 20 million people, Stalin, and because you don't believe in God and Stalin didn't believe in God, and therefore you're the same. That sort of argumentation is not going to work. All that shows that some individuals may abuse the notion of God, just as some individuals will abuse the notion of no God, or atheism, if you like. So that's not a very good argument. What else did he say? He made a comment about love. Well, just for the sake of the audience and those that are unfamiliar with the Islamic concept of God is, one of his attributes is love. One of his attributes is love. And there's a tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he was with his companions and he said to them, you see this mother, how the mother loves their child? Do you think that mother would want them to be harmed or hurt by fire? And they said, no, the mother loves the child. He said, God loves his servant, his creation, more than a mother loves her child. So absolutely, love is an essential part of Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if you do not show love to a child, you cannot enter paradise. Allah will not show, God will not show you love. So love is an essential part. I know some Muslims don't exhibit love, true, but the teaching of Islam, an essential component is to love one another, to love humanity. What else did he say? He said that, he also said something about that we as human beings, we rationalize our decisions, so there's no way of actually converting. But what I would say here is this, the arguments that I put forward this evening are objective arguments. You don't have to believe in God to argue them. And Tim's point is actually conflating truth with the acceptance of truth. So what I'm arguing this evening can be objectively said to be true. What I'm saying here, I'm not saying that we have to believe in God to believe in what I'm saying that we do need God, whether he exists or not. So you have to understand the nature of tonight's debate. So one can believe in what I'm arguing, even though one doesn't believe in God, and one necessarily doesn't have to rationalize their position. What else? Now, let me move on to the moral argument. That I said that we need God. We need God in order to guarantee morality. Now, humanists, ground morality in human beings. But the problem there, folks, is that evolution, Darwinism, has destroyed this kind of uniqueness about human beings that we can ground morality in such creatures. Why? Because there's no distinctive quality about them that we can hold on to. There's nothing about human beings that we can say is actually special about them. There's no ground to play here. Because if one claims that humans are somehow special, one commits what's called the fallacy of speciesism. That is, an unjustified bias towards one's species. Why? Well, think about it. Why humans special? The same blind process that has coughed out human beings has also coughed out rats and amoebas. But we don't instill any kind of specialness with these creatures. No, we don't, or even mosquitoes. Now, just to give you an explanation here, I have a quote by Ernest Maguire, who's one of the leading evolutionist biologists, and he's actually passed away now. He says this. He says, the concepts of unchanging essence and the complete discontinuities between every type and all others make genuine evolutionary thinking impossible. He says, I agree with the claim that the existentialist philosophers of Aristotle and Plato are incompatible with the evolutionary thinking. He's saying those classical philosophers that granted some kind of specialness about human beings doesn't work when all that you have is the theory of evolution. That uniqueness, that value that we instill in human beings vanishes completely. However, with theism, humans have equal worth and uniqueness in the light of metaphysical grounding in God's creation. God instills in human beings this specialness, this sacredness, this divinity. But if you take that equation out, then you just have this blind process just coughing out these things called human beings who are just freaks of nature. So morality is not going to work if all that you have is just the natural world, if you have no God. Now he also said, he made a comment about low intelligence, that somehow low intelligence, that being religious or believing in God somehow equals to low intelligence. You lost some credence there, I have to say. Is that the case when we look at the medieval time of the Muslims, that the foundations of modern science can be traced back to medieval Muslims, who all believed in God, who believed that the world had natural law that was created by God? When these people, when these theologians, logicians, mathematicians, scientists were developing the foundations of modern science, did they have no intelligence? I don't think so. But he gave the example of accepting gay marriage, that now somehow we're civilized and enlightened human beings, that we're evolving into this kind of progressed morality. Because now we accept gay marriage. No, I'm sorry. Without God, without defining the foundation of morality, good and evil, all you have is moral change. There's no such thing as moral progress. Think about it. If there's no standard, how do you know there's moral progress?
Do you think gay marriage is moral progress? Given that you do believe in God.
No calling out at this point.
You can ask me that later. But patience is a virtue. Now, what I would say here, so, another tactic. First podium, then something. So there's no concept of, without objective morality, all that we have is subjective expressions of personal taste. Chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream in the world. Who's going to argue with me? Who's going to demonstrate that that is false? No one. That's an opinion. But my folks, brothers and sisters, without God, without objective morality, that's what amounts to morality. That's what happens. Morality just becomes an opinion. So, if morality is just custom, fashion, habit, how do we condemn the one who says, I want to flout in the face of fashion, custom, and habit, and says, I want to rape? How are we going to argue with that person? You are wrong, but you can't say you're wrong if you don't have that moral high ground, and you can only have that moral high ground as if you have objective morality. So this idea that now that we're somehow enlightened human beings because we accept gay marriage now, simply won't work. There is no moral progress, there's only moral change. What else do we have? Happiness, right. What I would say here is this, it's quite an important point. Happiest compared to what? You can only be happiest compared to what? Everyone else in the world? Well, that's not a good strategy. There are a tremendous amount of studies showing how depressed human beings are. The psychologists, sociologists have defined this term called existential angst. This kind of dread, some deep absence in the world. Martin Seligman from Pennsylvania University released an article in, I won't be able to say because I'm running out of time, maybe I'll speak about it later. But there's many evidences to argue against that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Adam is far too clever for me, I'm afraid. No, I cannot think of many things to rebut. But let's begin at the end. If there's no moral progress, just moral change. An end to slavery. The equality of women. I call that progress. Let's go back to the beginning. You seem to have a very nihilistic opinion of a non-religious account of the world and meaning in the world. I think what you're suggesting is enlightenment is a disease, that Nietzsche said that the loss of God meant that life didn't mean anything any longer. Well, actually, what I would say to you is that people who don't think that their meaning in life is given to them by God are people who embrace creating meaning in themselves in their own lives. That, if you like, is the project of life. And perhaps the way that we see the world, it's just a way of seeing the world, is that life itself is empty and meaningless. The project of creating a successful life as a human being is to imbue it with meaning by doing things. And that begins being compassionate to other people. So that would be my response to that. I didn't realise that Carl Sagan had inspired The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That passage that you quoted is almost exactly the beginning. So that was a plagiarist, I have no idea. But no, our lives are not meaningless. And I think the idea that because our lives end in death, that they have no meaning, is one that doesn't make sense to me. I think, when I said earlier on, the difficulty of this kind of conversation is that we are persuaded of what we think, and we find it very hard to think outside that. But I'm not persuaded at all of the idea that my life means nothing simply because it ends. Actually, it gives it meaning. I don't like quoting Richard Dawkins because he's so often taken the wrong way. But one of the things I really liked about Dawkins was saying that to think that out of the infinite, I will paraphrase this, out of the infinite combination of DNA, that you and I are here in our ordinariness is miracle enough. So that actually really speaks to me, and I can see that it's the Humanist Society of Scotland has a little slogan. We're looking for a new one. If you've got any ideas, come up with it. But the one we've got is simply celebrate the one life we have. This is it. You know, you've only got one life, so live it. Be grateful for it. There are many people who don't believe that there is a God, or think there may not be a God, but who think there are much more important things to do, which is to create meaning in their lives. Your story about gould and that we've evolved from fish, isn't that great? I find that a wonderful story. And the idea that bacteria have more purpose reminds me of a story which scientists amongst you will know much better. Somebody once asked a famous British scientist if there was evidence for God in the natural world. He said, well, if there is a God, he's evidently got an inordinate fondness for beetles. You were talking about moralities and talking about the torturing children and saying that's wrong. Yes, I think we would agree with that. One of the things, I remember a few years ago, before the Dalai Lama wrote the book I was talking about, Beyond Religion, he said, I love meeting people from other faiths, because when we speak, we realise how much we have in common with one another. And humanists sit there kind of going, yeah, well, that's just like a human. This is the thing that inspires me as a humanist is the thought that there is more, we have much more in common than divide us. And actually, if we could accept that these different narratives of the world, which, where your interpretation of God, and I say, Islam, let's not forget that within Islam, there are people who disagree about God so much that they want to kill one another. They're doing so in Iraq right now. They're doing so elsewhere. Within Christianity, we've had thousands of years of people killing one another because their interpretation of what God meant wasn't somebody else's interpretation. And humanists say, let's look beyond this. Actually, as human beings, we have much more in common than we have that makes us different. Yeah, and the idea that we're just animals. Well, actually, we are just animals, but there's one really big difference between man and every other animal, apart from 7 species of ant and 2 species of termite. Mankind is the only species that makes war on itself. Foxes kill chickens. Eagles take deer. They're different species. Man is the only species that makes war on itself. I'll leave you with that thought. We have 4 minutes 38 seconds to carry on rebuttling, but I think I'm buckled out.
In the name of God, most merciful, most kind. Right, so I'd just like to round up this evening, on my part anyway. So, now, Tim said earlier that, yes, well, there is moral progress because an end to slavery, equality for women, for example. Now, I agree that those are, that is actually progress, that's moral progress. So the question is this: if there is no God, then why are those things wrong? Why is slavery wrong? We see that in the insect world, if we're just natural byproducts of a lengthy process of evolution, we see in the insect world that they often have slavery. But why is slavery wrong in human relations? If God does not exist, why are these things evil? Why are these things wrong? Why should we give equality to women? I hope it's not edited out. I'm saying, if you don't believe in God, how can we condemn these things? And I don't think that this has been adequately demonstrated this evening, that we can have objective morality without God. Tim also said here, and I think Tim agrees that there's no such thing as objective meaning, objective purpose, which was the reason, which was what I was arguing this evening. I think he agrees that without God these things don't exist. But he said here something quite... Oh, you do? You do? Okay, well, we haven't demonstrated it anyway. Maybe you can do so in your 5 minutes. But what he said here is that you create meaning. But if you create meaning, it can't be objective. You can discover meaning, like we discover mathematics, which is objective. But if you're creating meaning, which I thought that that's what you meant by not being objective, what is that, folks? That's living a lie. That's living an illusion. What we do, we fool ourselves. We become happy fantasists. There's no meaning in life. There's no purpose, but what I'll do is I'll create meaning for myself. Now, in an era of science and reason, where we were told that we should reject religion because it's fairy tales and make-believe, now we're being told in the 21st century by atheists and humanists that we should create meaning for ourselves. Is it an irony there? I think so anyway. He also said that death does not do away with meaning in life, but it actually enhances it. Why? I don't think so. Because, please, can you give me the answer to this question? If someone said to you, someone who did not believe in God, if you don't believe in God also, you believe that life just ends at the grave, that the entire human race will end in destruction, and someone said to you, one of your close friends said to you, I want to kill myself, I want to end my life. What reasons would you give him that would be true not to kill himself? If you said to him, well, no, you're a great friend, you've got the whole of your life ahead of you. But he would just say, but it's all going to end. It makes no difference whether I live or die. It makes no difference whatsoever. But I will miss you, but you will also die. Not only you will die, but the entire human race. We can't answer those questions adequately with our intuition if God does not exist, in a sense of being reasonable and true. I don't have much time. I was going to speak about some other issues, but what I'd say here is this. I'd like to end with this. Christopher Hitchens, before he passed away, said this: one thing that grave illness does is to make you examine familiar principles and seemingly reliable sayings. What I would say is this, that one day we will be on our deathbeds. And when we're there, and I've sat with people that have been on their deathbeds, those things that you thought that were so sure in your life, so concrete, you will reassess them, analyze them. Those feelings, those passions that you had, those principles you lived by. Now, what I'd like to say is this, is that make sure that when you're there, you don't regret the way that you lived. Bertrand Russell, lots of atheists refer to his earlier writings, more than his latter. He said this before he passed away. He said, this is a man who lived a life without God. He said, I wrote with a passion and force because I really thought I had a gospel, good news. Now I'm cynical about the gospel because it won't stand the test of life. I would hate anybody to end up like that and have that deep end with saying, please, think about meaning and purpose. Think about God. Thank you very much.
Yeah, very brief. Thank you, Jan. Right. Yeah, the difficulty for me of comprehension is when you said life can be given meaning by God. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know which God we have here. Are we talking about a specific Islamic interpretation of God? Is it one which encompasses it, Judaism and Christianity? Because they are quite similar. Is it a broader thing where Buddhists or Hindus or followers of other faiths could see themselves in this? It is difficult, and I'm not tone deaf, and I'm really not trying to understand you. I'm actually trying to understand you, but I think that if you like, it's not like the Irishman who, when asked about how to get to a certain place, or wouldn't be starting from here. We're starting from different grounds, and the root of your understanding of the world is very different from my own. The argument against suicide, you do your best. There are many people who give up their time to sit there on phone lines with Samaritans trying to help people. I haven't done it, I admire them tremendously. But we also have to accept that people live their own lives, and there are times nowadays where people living with terminal illness of a particular kind want to be able to end their own lives. And again, people who are humanists, and some people of faith agree that they should be allowed to do so under certain very, very well protected circumstances. As for Hitch, he was a great public debater, very good drinker. His advice was actually that, to all you young people, was looking back, might have got a bit lighter on the cocktails and the fags. I think I had on that thought. So thank you all very much for listening.
Thanks for our speakers, and we open the floor to Q&A now. We've got 15 minutes, so we have questions.
We go up to be
I think preferably shoot stick right chairs.
Right. Somebody asked me what's the capital of Peru. I know that.
Right, okay, we have a question here. No, you, because you were first.
So,
Hi, Stuart.
how you doing? Very well. Nice to see you again.
Stuart's my stalker, right?
That's one way of describing it. So, there are two reasons that you sort of give for our lives being meaningless, not having meaning. The first one is that things are going to eventually wind down and the universe is going to be destroyed and there's not really such thing as human race. And the second one is that there isn't something outside it giving it meaning, in your case, God. So, it doesn't seem to, that argument doesn't seem to work. For instance, this debate tonight only lasts for 2.5 hours, right? 2 hours, however long it lasts.
It feels like 4.
Well, it lasts for a finite time. And yet, I don't think anyone here would argue that, maybe someone would, I don't think anyone here would argue that this debate has been completely meaningless. Okay? Now, it also doesn't have someone at the end who will say, the winner of this debate is Tim. Or it doesn't have an ultimate person giving it meaning. So
it's just simply objectivity, frankly.
right. And it's a bit like a movie, right?
Stuart, do you have a question?
Yeah. Okay.
Usually has a squiggly thing at the end.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, just because something is finite and doesn't have something giving it purpose, does not mean it's meaningless. And I don't think that applies to the universe any more than it applies to this debate.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. What I would say here is this, that meaning exists with a framework, if you like. For example, a goal has significance within a background of a football game. For example, I've been told that if you win the league, you're a football fan. No, me neither. And that if you win the league three times in a row, that's a great significance, and you get celebrating that. Now, that has immense significance with a framework. It's relative to a framework, and that's temporal. But if we take that on a broader scale, a broader framework, if that goal did not happen, if that team did not win 3 league games in a row, would it really impact our lives? say, the football fan too. It wouldn't really impact our lives. It would have a very trivial significance, wouldn't it? It wouldn't really impact our lives. So in essence, what I'm saying here is that we have meaning in our lives, in the sense it's relative to a framework that we construct. But in the grand scheme of things, that the universe is going to end in destruction, it actually means nothing. So just as the goal does not mean anything to us if it doesn't happen, then the life that we live means nothing if the life doesn't exist to the grand scheme of things. And I'm not just arguing that in order to have meaning we need immortality. That's not what I'm arguing here. I'm arguing for two conditions, two necessary conditions, that's immortality and also God. That we have something objective, we have some final meaning, if you like. So that it's not just a matter of time.
You at the back.
You at the back.
Perhaps you take it backstage and ask, is there a need for meaning? Because I don't see why we need for our life to have some great purpose in the grand scheme of things, but a universal scale for them to have meaning to us.
I would say that a lot of people would have difficulty with saying that we need to have meaning. I think a lot of people would agree here that we do actually need some type of meaning, whether it's objective or subjective, that we do in our lives do construct meaning in some shape or form. But don't just take my word for it as in a philosophical sense. If we look at psychological studies and sociology, speaking about Martin Seligman, we'll have a chance to speak about it now. So, Seligman wrote an article in Psychology Today about 20 years ago, and what he did was to analyse the baby boomer generation. What he found was that in that single generation there was a 10 times increase in the number of people suffering from depression. And he said that if there was a 10 times increase in the number of people, sorry, you weren't allowed to comment after my that's not fair. So, okay, great, we'll go back to you. So you should have a right to answer what Stuart said as well. Otherwise I'm just going to talk all night. So he said that if there was a 10-fold increase in heart disease, it would be considered an epidemic. So then what he did was to ask why. Not only did he just analyse it, but he diagnosed it. He said in that generation, the reason that they were suffering depression in the university campuses is because they lost the art of relating their life to something bigger than themselves, something greater, so that their lives were actually real, that there's some kind of significance in their lives. This is just his writing. So I would think that it would be quite naive to think that we don't need any kind of meaning. I think that's quite destructive in our society. I think that's why we're arguing here today. Can I come on that? Yeah, sure.
I think actually it's one of the things that aggressive secularism is a phrase that's been reused an awful lot recently. Pope was the first person to kick it off when he came over to Britain nearly a year. And what he was actually referring to, you look at the things he was attacking, were what you might call empty consumerism and nihilism. That's not what humanists are about. There are many people who don't, if you like, think of themselves either as humanists or atheists. People for whom, if you like, looking after their sick neighbour or being a good mum. There are many people who create meaning in their lives by living a good life and a purposeful one, but who are not really obsessed by buying the next pair of trainers. True. So, yeah, of course, there are people for whom life is futile and meaningless. There are others who are able to create meaning in it. What I think humanists would say is that we need to encourage people to find meaning in their lives and show them how to do that, whether or not they believe.
Yeah. And then,
can we have somebody who's not, if you like, one of the non-believers ask a question, particularly about Peru in the capital? You're in the back.
Hi, sorry, this question for Tim. It was in regards to certain terms that you were using, which I found a bit vague. One of those was a few of them: love, success, morality. For example, if you take love, a person can love different things. Himself, family, cars, house.
Okay, I take love. What I mean by love is what the Greeks call agape, it means compassion. I don't mean compassion.
Compassion. So, for example, a person who would say was narcissistic, who loved himself.
That's not what I'm talking about here.
You wouldn't say that that was a form of love?
No, I wouldn't say it's a form of mental illness.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the Greeks, because they used to love young boys. and it was part and parcel of their culture. Now, you're obviously going to agree with that, but my point is that
you're making a big assumption there.
Well, I hope you disagree with that. But the problem is that many atheists and many humanists condemn such acts, saying that they're...
Well, you're talking about pedophilia.
Yes, well, yeah. But the problem is that if you don't establish objective morality, you're not in a position, as I spoke about the moral high ground, to condemn such acts. It becomes relative to their culture. And what's interesting is that this wasn't something that was unusual. It was very part of their culture. So would you not say that's a problem for your position?
Well, I don't know how on earth you can have objective morality given to you by God when the world disagrees about the nature of God. Christianity would be one thing.
Yeah.
If you like, the way that Christians dress gives offence to many Muslims.
But just because
Christians,
my position is...
Christian women often dress in a most immodest way, which gives offence to Muslims. Well, there's reported this now. So there are different, but their morality is given to them by God, different God. So where's the objective morality to which you refer? I think what I would understand as being the root of it is that there are some fundamentals which are true for all human beings across all societies to do with murder. For instance, are pretty much universal. But the argument for moral progress that I think we can make is that over the last couple of thousand years we have moved from autocratic forms of government where people are told what to believe and where they are ordered to behave in certain ways to allowing human beings to have a greater degree of freedom and democratic responsibility and respect. And we now, in this country, at least in a country where women are regarded, although they're not paid equally, as being equal to men, and gay people are regarded almost, not quite, as being equal to heterosexuals. And this is moral progress. And I think it is objective, because we can look at it in the context of society as a whole. And actually, it's a much easier thing to judge by taking a poll and putting things to a vote than it is to ask God, who I have to get in touch with via you or somebody else who's interpreting God. That's difficult to see as objective morality. Is that fair? Might somebody else here, humanists?
If you put it to the vote of the Greeks, it was perfectly fine to sexually abuse children.
Oh, wait a minute.
Sorry, you asking me?
I think pederasty, you're referring to, was between men and teenage boys.
No, it was actually young boys. It was part of the culture because the relations I've looked into this, the relationships of the student and the teacher.
I cannot speak for Pericles.
My point, I'm asking for your opinion. See, when I asked you the question, you said, well, God is no use to us with morality, but all that would show is that in your position...
The Greeks believed in God. The Greeks had Zeus, Athena, Hermes, keep going, Hermes.
Okay.
I don't know what the point is at, but I think trying to get me onto the ground and talking about underage gay sex is pretty dodgy, frankly.
I would like to take back to the statement of morality must be objective.
Yes.
Because, and I would also like to tell me why you think torturing young boys is wrong.
Why I think it's wrong?
Two central points.
Torturing young boys.
What is objective morality?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me why you think it's wrong to torture young boys?
Because firstly, I believe in the realm of objective morality, and I believe that...
What can you explain what objective morality is?
Yeah. So there's, in philosophy, in ethics, there are two aspects of morality. There is ontology and epistemology. Now, my argument this evening has been in the realm of ontology, the basis of morality. Tim grounds morality in human beings, I ground morality in God. But if we're speaking about epistemology, we can all recognise that torturing a child for fun is objectively morally wrong.
Why? why? That is what I wouldn't be.
That's a very good question.
Justified.
And why would be the fact that, from my perspective, I think that God has instilled in us certain faculties to deduce that sort of thing, that we can understand that torturing a child for fun is evil. Now, that doesn't mean that it becomes jaded, but we can use methods of reason and intellect. We can use the religious scriptures to come to the conclusion that such acts are wrong.
But it's possible to consider that a society exists somewhere where they don't consider it wrong.
Well, that's a danger.
And they might believe in God.
Well, the Aztecs used to kill children at one point and sacrifice them. A lot of early civilizations where killing the children was totally allowed to propitiate gods. Sorry, I forgot about that. So yes.
Next question, you first.
Okay. I wonder, I'm very hard to see what exactly the metaphysics of holy ontology, which is a moral fact, is there really that? I mean, like, you think it has to have something to do with God somehow, but it's unclear to me exactly what is the minimum requirement, what's the minimum requirement on how the world has to be for there to be objective moral fact. I mean, I ask this particularly because I worry that, like, if it has to be the thing outside that gives significance, then it sounds like things are going to end up being meaningless or purposeless for God. I'd be very surprised if any Muslim or any other theist in any of the Abrahamic traditions would say that God's existence is meaningless for God or something. But there's not something that stands outside God giving his life meaning. So, I mean, until, like, I felt like, you asserted that, like, there couldn't be morality without God, but you didn't say what properties of morality, what it is about, like, the constitutive basis of morality, right, that means it has to depend on something which has to have the properties that God has. Like, it was really totally muddy.
Okay, well, let me try and explain it again. The reason that we need God for morality is because God provides that transcendence for morality to be objective so that we can have praise and blame, that we can have that moral high ground. If morality does not have that transcendence, then we cannot...
What do you mean by transcendence?
Outside of our cultural evolutionary process,
condition. Whoa. I mean, it's just about your opinion on it. So, like, you have to explain why God's opinion
No, this is not an opinion. This is a philosophical claim.
No, you're misunderstanding.
This is not an opinion.
God, right? So you have to explain why God's opinion is more important than human beings.
So hold on a minute. Let me speak. You made a bold statement. This is the absurdity. A man has said, why is it that God's opinion is greater than human beings? That's saying that even if God exists, his opinion can't be greater than human beings. I mean, come on. This is the depth. That's what he said.
It has got a valid point.
1 second, can we have on order, please? Okay, you have your hand up for a long time.
I think he has got a valid point, and what I'm trying to say to you, you tied morality to the existence of God. Yes. I am a God believer. However, I find some flaws with your argument. In one of them, you tied morality to the existence of God. However, you have not explained that most of the scandal was church-related or other religious-related, as we know.
Most of the what, sorry?
Scandals.
Scandals.
Like children abuse and things like that. These are associated with some of the churches, some of the mosques, that people who are supposed to represent God and all the rest of it.
Bertrand Russell, one second. Bertrand Russell said that we should not judge a religion by its followers. Now, why he said that?
But you are selective in your quote. And the other thing, if you let me finish it, please. The other thing is, there are some isolated communities in the Amazon and out of this world. They don't have God, yes, but they are happy. They have code of practice. How did they get their code of practice and morality from? Because they don't believe in God. Ancient Egyptians, before Christ was born.
They got their morality because they don't believe in God.
Yes, they don't believe in God.
I didn't say, oh, okay.
Because you tie morality to the existence of God.
You're confusing the point here. Let me explain. I'm not saying that you have to believe in God to be moral. Yeah? I'm not saying you have to believe in God to be a good person. I'm not saying that you have to believe in God to avoid doing bad things. I'm saying morality doesn't make sense if God doesn't exist. There's a difference there. Yeah, that's your no, I'm just trying no, I've just made a clarification. So my point here is that, you know, atheist humanists, that's why I like him. I think he's a great guy. The things that he's spoken about justice, injustice in the world, you know, working for equality for women, etc. You know, these are qualities that I admire. He can acknowledge that, right? But my argument with him today is I'm not saying he's an evil man.
No.
I'm saying
that's not what the argument about. The argument is you can't morality being objective to God. The other one point, sorry, I don't want to take everybody time. I find it hard, although God we agree, or we don't, some of us don't agree. We have got too many religions, they all believe in God. God is supposed to be, and you know, He's the creator, all the rest. Why did He not send one religion to all of us?
Sorry,
why
sir,
did He create this?
you're confusing the point. I'm not arguing for religion today.
No, but
my argument's not about religion.
Indeed. But one thing.
Yeah, you've had your hand up for a long time, and the sister here as well. So we'll start with you, and then the sister, and these last questions.
So far we haven't defined morality. If you define morality as, say, attempting to create the maximum happiness in most people, then all morality comes as an automatic cause of that definition when you apply evidence. You know, you have to define morality before you can make any argument like that. So, you know, if morality is just trying to make everyone happy, then you don't need God to do it, because by definition, morality, there is objective morality. Torturing children means that people are unhappy and provides very little benefit to the few people who are torturing them. You know, so there is objective morality that objectively harms people far worse than the small amount of pleasure that these sadists get. Yeah. So, you know, you don't need to have God to have objective morality if you define morality.
Okay, so your question is?
So why does it need God if you actually define morality before saying you need God for it? Well, just say maximizing happiness for most people.
Okay, well that's a very good point. But I would just say that you have to know that morality exists until you can attribute that to that principle. And I guess your principle is about avoiding harm. But what's wrong with harming others if God doesn't exist, if morality doesn't exist? Sir, please, it's not rebuttals on the stage, this is just a Q&A. What's wrong in harming other human beings? Animals harm other animals all the time. Why would that be wrong for us to harm other people? When one is arguing that avoiding harm is the moral basis of human beings, one is presupposing that is good. My point is, why is it good? Surely good has to be demonstrated first. Morality has to be demonstrated. And I would just say this to you. Why is that objectively true?
Because if you live in a world where...
It's a rhetorical question.
Final question to the sister here.
My question is for Tim. You briefly mentioned psychological findings of religious people associated with their intelligence.
Can you speak up a wee bit?
Sure.
I heard it, but they may not have heard you behind.
But I also wanted to just point out other psychological findings where there was some for religious people compared to non-religious people, and findings suggested that religious people had a better mental health and physical health. Also, furthermore, I just wanted to point out Pascal Boyer, who is an atheist, evolutionary psychologist, and an anthropologist, was once asked if there was ever a child that was raised on an island on his own, bringing himself up, would he ever become religious? And to that he responded, if such a child did exist, he would indeed actually develop religious ideas. Furthermore, Justin Lee Barrett has also been working in this field, and he also has done work on his upcoming book called Born Believers, which he also states that religious beliefs are prevalent in children. It's not innate, but they have a...
I would agree with you. I think that we've all... You have too many questions and we have not much time. Very, very briefly.
Unless we have like just 10 seconds.
Yeah, just so, I mean, if there was no need for God, then wouldn't these beliefs die down as new generation comes, as we are evolving with better technology, better way of life?
I think if somebody grows up on a desert island and the thunder comes, they'll make a god out of it. If you're growing up without the extraordinary advances that we have had in recent time in technological explanation of how the world works, then you'll make a naturalistic explanation and you'll create gods. There's a really good book called 6 Impossible Things Before Breakfast by Lewis Goldberg, who who thinks it's a God-shaped hole in our brains as human beings. It's a very natural thing to believe in gods, but the diversity of different kinds of gods that we've had over the history of humankind, which include gods that require human sacrifice, thank you for reminding me, and vengeful gods, and really nice gods, and gods who are, three-in-one gods like the Christian God. There's an awful lot of different gods out there. So yes, somebody on it will come up with a god, and it might be a new one, and it might have a lot of them with other gods. In the same way that many gods, like the Christian Jesus, is quite like Tammuz, is quite like Mithras, is quite like, etc. So, yes, I take your point. You probably would come up with a god system of your own if you were brought up on your own as an island.
If I could just happiness. In the sociology of religion, there are studies that show that actually people that are religious are happier, they have better mental states, and actually people that actually attend individuals that attend church are more likely to give to charity. So, yeah, so I would say, on the contrary, I think religion is a good influence, and it actually is actually better for society. My argument today is not about religion.
Can I ask Mr. Richard to rebut that for me? Because he's like itching to.
Why do you have a tag team, though?
Final point. We have to wrap it up.
I don't think you should have a point.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Be 1 minute only. We need to wrap up.
Okay, so the findings about religious people being of lower intelligence are the case, no matter what you believe. The findings about those people having better mental health are indeed true, but they seem to be related to people being in as part of a community, not actually what they believe about God. So actually, humanism seems to be going the right way in creating a community for people who don't believe in God, because the religious community aspect seems to be the most important thing. Religion does indeed make people give more to some charities, but it also systematically increases racism and in-group prejudice.
We've run out of time.